What's up? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be discussing film, which I know is a very broad term. It's something we kind of touch on a lot on this channel, given that this is more about film cameras and things of that nature. But I do want to be a little bit more broad, give a little overview for people just getting into film. What does that mean? And then if people are like trying to explore other options, what even is there? I took notes, so we're gonna get into those really quickly and then just kind of touch on different things. I'll put chapters in. If you're more curious about certain parts of it than other parts of it, film, you can just kind of click around and all that. But I hope that you stay, enjoy the video, like it, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. Film, as we know, was kind of developed in 1826, which was when the first recorded images were produced. A lot of people leading up to that were doing experiments with silver crystals and noticing that they could be affected by light. A guy concocted a camera obscura in a room and took an image out of his window. Now, a camera obscura was actually developed in roughly 470 to 391 BC by a Han Chinese philosopher by the name of Mozi or Moji or something like that. I'm not too entirely sure about the pronunciation on that point. That's kind of the origination there. About 60 years after 1826, I guess 59 years after 1826, in 1885, a gentleman named George Eastman Kodak, developed paper film. And that could be loaded into a portable camera that you could take with you. And that was in 1889 that he transitioned to celluloid. So rolling into the 20th century, that's kind of where film was at. It was shortly after that, in 1901, that medium format film was created. What am I saying when I say that? What does that mean? It's 120 film, as what it's kind of commonly referred to as, and especially in today's market. Medium format film is film that comes looking somewhat like this. There is a spool, paper backing. It's about that big. Obviously this is a blank, but that's kind of what we're talking about when I'm talking about 120 or medium format film. There have been other iterations of it throughout time, most notably 620. Very few differences here, except this is a little bit thinner. It has a smaller hole to it, as you can tell. These were kind of primarily used for Kodak cameras. This was a little bit more universal to a lot of other cameras. Right now, in today's market, 120 is definitely going to be the more popular variety of medium format. At the time, in the early 1900s, it was kind of picking up steam. People were using it. There were more cameras developed for that format, and it was easier to carry around than the large plates and all of that stuff. Something happened in the 1910s thereabout. A guy in Germany was developing a small portable camera that he could put 35mm film into, which was also very popular at the time, used for motion picture cameras. But he wanted to load that into a small compact thing. Then World War I happened, and that kind of shelved that project for a while until 1923. That really jump-started the 35mm film market, which is pretty much the most common. When you talk about like, oh, I want to shoot film photography, you're likely referring to 35mm, like this. Comes in a canister that big. You'll notice there's a bit of a size discrepancy from medium format 120 film to 35mm. With that being said, this is still very high quality film. And it developed over the years. Companies like Kodak would release iterations of it that were maybe a little easier for consumers. Developed color film, better film emulsions, better grain structures that were a little bit more sensitive to certain wavelengths of light. It's a very complicated thing, but for the most part, 35mm was kind of the business. 120 kind of hit a resurgence as better cameras were used for that format, and it was meant to be kind of that step up from regular consumer 35mm and easier to carry around than the larger formats. So 120 kind of fit that middle ground for a professional photographer, for press. There's a lot of press cameras out there that shoot 120, and the whole design behind that is for those larger prints that you might need. 120 lends itself to that because there's a larger image, more detail, more definition. 35mm you're still able to pull a lot of detail out of, just smaller. Because of 120's kind of proliferation, in 1965 they released 220 film, which is basically 120 but double. So roll of 120 like this, you'll notice there's numbers on it that say 6x9, is 8, 6x6 is 12, 645 is 16. So what that means is that depending on what camera you load it into, it's going to take different sections and expose that on the film. There's 6x6, which is square, by 9, which is a lot more panoramic, and a lot of different other formats, but it all still shoots on this film. So 220 basically took that, doubled the length of this, meaning the shots that you were going to get, so say if you're shooting 6x9 as opposed to 8, now you're getting 16. If you're shooting 6x6, 12, you're now shooting 24 shots. Lengthen the amount of film you have, reduce the amount of time you spend reloading. In the modern day of 2024, 220 film is kind of on the wayside. There's still expired rolls of it out there. And I believe Reflex Labs has some 220 film stock that they make. Other than that, it's not really as popular of a commodity, which leads us to another unpopular commodity, which was released in 1972, and that is 110 film. This, I don't have a cartridge of it at the moment, but I have this one that's in my Pentax Auto 110, but it is very small. This is kind of reminiscent of 16mm motion picture film, roughly about the same size. And the idea behind this was shrinking down the 126 format that Kodak produced, which is a cartridge version of 35mm, and putting it in a smaller camera. There are innumerable issues about this film in particular. For one, it's very small, so there's not a lot of detail. For two, wasn't really designed for professionals, so the equipment that is out there for it aren't that great. For three, there's only one company that really supports it, and that's Lomography. They have two film stocks, I believe, Orca and Tiger. Orca being black and white, Tiger being color. It's a limited option, and it's pretty expensive to shoot. Not all labs can develop it and scan it properly, so it's not the best, but it's still an option, kind of. I think Lomography also makes Metropolis, and they're like specialty color films in 110. You don't want that smoke. That's kind of where we're at with the film formats. There's large format as well. Truthfully, I'm not the person to ask about that. So far as I know, you basically get a sheet of film and then you put it in the camera, and you either have a 4x5 or an 8x10 or something like that. And they're like really massive prints, and it's expensive and not really for me. So if you know somebody who's into that, ask them. What do we have now in 2024? As mentioned, we have 110, very limited amounts. It's not very practical, it's very expensive, and the quality is pretty low. It's not really a great canvas in which to paint a masterpiece, you could say. I still like it, even though I think it's silly and doesn't make a whole lot of sense to shoot. It's still a lot of fun. Next up, we have 35mm. Obviously, that's still around. 35mm cameras and film are very prolific in 2024. We got black and white film, and color positive film. So black and white film is going to be the most cost effective. It's the most affordable. Companies like Ilford, Ferrania, Kodak, Fuji, Adox, other smaller companies as well. Agfa, I think, also has black and white. They're all releasing black and white films. They're typically a little bit easier to make, so it's easier for companies to produce them. Rough overview of those. Ilford is going to be the best in my opinion. They have the most variety, and you can read through all the text sheets on all of their different film stocks. They're the most affordable, and I feel like they're the most consistent. Ferrani is a favorite of mine. They only have 3 stocks. They're all really high quality, a little bit expensive, and then you have to ship from Italy, so it's a whole thing there. Kodak is like one of the more popular ones, especially here. Their black and white film is okay. I just don't think that for the price that you're going to spend on it, it's that much better than Ilford, which is notably cheaper. Fuji has one black and white film stock called Acros. Another company you should be on the lookout for is Film Washi. It's just like a guy in France that hand paints film emulsions, and it's really good black and white film. If you feel so inclined to check out his stuff, it's a little bit more experimental, but it is pretty good nonetheless. Color film is going to be a little bit more complicated. There's really only one company that's making color film right now, and that's Kodak. They have a variety of film stocks from Kodak Gold 200 all the way up to like Portra 800 and that kind of range. There is Wolfen NC400 and NC500 and Ilford Vintage Color. Those are 2 color films that are actually produced by the same company in Germany, I believe, called Innovis Coat, and they're kind of muted color films. They're a little bit more expensive. It's an acquired taste in my opinion, but that's another option. Fuji also has color film, kind of. They've got 200 and 400. The rumor is that it's basically just repackaged Kodak Gold 200 and Kodak Ultramax 400. So do with that information what you will. There's also Harman Phoenix, which is a 200 speed experimental film from Harman, which is an offshoot of Ilford. Harman Phoenix is pretty interesting. If you want to support them, I definitely recommend that. I've heard that you might want to try to shoot it at 120 thereabouts or 160. There's a whole article that Film Lab in Spain actually wrote about the film to get the best results. So I would check that out before you shoot it. I've definitely seen some better results since they've released it in 120. So that's exciting. We have the Cinestill films, and these are 35mm and 120 color films. They're basically just repurposed Kodak motion picture film with the remjet washed off. And the remjet is this layer, a protective layer on film. So when the film is running through a motion picture camera to shoot a movie or music video, what have you, the static of that friction accidentally causes halation on the film. These companies wash the remjet off of that so it can be developed in C41 chemicals, which is very affordable, and that's what all color film stocks can be developed in. And we get companies like Cinestill, which has 800T. Your mileage may vary on that. From my experience, I think Cinestill is kind of the most expensive. They're pretty consistent in their quality, and I believe at this stage Kodak is sending them motion picture film without any remjet on it, so they don't even have to wash it off anymore. So that's kind of nice. But I think Reflex Labs and Flick Film are two companies that do the exact same thing. They have other products as well, but those products, specifically the Aurora and the 800 Tungsten, are both more affordable, and given the fact that they're the same product, it just makes more sense from my opinion. Color positive film is the last of the kind of 35mm films we'll talk about. This also kind of carries over into 120 film. Color positive film is slide film, so when you shoot it, it gets developed, you can like put it through a slide view or project it on a wall. Things are typically shot in negative for standard color film, meaning if you were to do that, you would see the opposite of the colors, opposite of the lights and shadows. Obviously not the best. Looks a little bit more haunting than anything else. So color positive images, there's more layers, so it's harder to produce that film. It's harder to develop it. It's more expensive, more costly. The notable one is Ektachrome, which Kodak brought back a few years ago. It's kind of one of their older film stocks. They brought it back as a daylight balanced film. I find it to be very blue. Other people have had better results. It's expensive. Developing is going to be more expensive. Fuji does have two different color positive films. They've got Velvia and Provia. They are, again, very expensive, hard to come by. Fuji doesn't ship film to America all that often. So if you do have a shop and it does have it in stock, I would recommend scooping it up just so you can give it a shot before they inevitably stop producing it. And then for our 120 films, the medium formats, it's going to probably be about the same layout. There are fewer color films in 120. Specifically, Kodak has Gold 200, Ektar 100, and the Portra series. And that's about it for right now. There's the Cinestill companies that also have, I think, most, if not all of their film stocks in 120 as well. There's the black and white film stocks, which I think all pretty much carry over. And then also, as I mentioned, Harman is now releasing their Phoenix color film in 120. Pretty much an overview of the analog photography landscape as it is right now. Things could change, things could pick up. We've seen kind of an increase in popularity in recent years and kind of a decrease in products. So it's kind of interesting to see where things will go from there. So far as I can tell, sales have picked up, interest has picked up, more companies are throwing their hats into the ring to produce new stuff and bring things out to the market, so that's pretty exciting. If you have any specific questions and want specific answers, feel free to leave a comment down below. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, and check out the catalog of other videos on my channel. I talk about just about everything camera related, film photography related, so on and so forth. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it as always, and I will catch you on the next one.